We are 30 seconds to the beginning of the event. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jenna. And it's 1:30. So welcome to the Child Safeguarding for Children with Children, a virtual side event on the margins of the 76th session of the General Assembly. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. This event is co-organized with the World Organization of the Scout Movement and the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Miguel Caldeira, and that is probably the reason why I was chosen to be the Master of Ceremony, because of my initials MC. First, some household rules, so some technical announcements. We aim obviously to ensure a safe and inclusive space for the children and young people who are taking part in today's event. To that end, our speakers today, the ones who are under 18 years of age, are identified only with their first name. Similarly, if you are attending this meeting and you're under the age of 18, we ask you to not include your full name in your Zoom as your Zoom name. So we invite you to change it and only add your first name. If there are any, child safeguarding concerns, please send us a message using the Q&A or chat feature. I'm sure by now you know how the chat feature works. You can find it at the bottom of your Zoom dashboard. We would like to reach out to the child speakers, or rather, if you would like to reach out to the child speakers today or any of us in the organizations that are involved with this event, we request you to please also use the Q&A or chat feature, and we will address those questions, comments, or we'll place we'll give you the information later on if we're not able to do it today. The meeting chat function is going to be disabled for you to communicate within the audience, but we very much welcome you and encourage you to use it to provide resources, information, publications, or comments or questions to the speakers or to any of the participants in this event. We cannot promise that we are going to have everyone's question answered, but we'll definitely take that into consideration, and maybe later on we'll be able to provide you with information or with some answers. If you don't like my voice, you'll be able to use, or if you don't understand English, you'll be able to use the interpretation feature. So at the bottom of your dashboard, you'll see a little globe.
Si vous ne parlez pas anglais ou que vous êtes plus confortable, vous sentez
language. The languages available are Arabic, French, and Spanish. And obviously, we have Jenna here helping us with the American Sign Language. Thank you very much, Jenna, for your support today. To help the smooth transitions, we ask the speakers that are switching from the main language of the event, English, to take a moment and inform the participants that they are switching to a different language, French, for example, so interpreters can also switch in the proper channels. We have a very packed agenda today, and we may not be able, as I said, to accommodate all questions and comments from the floor, but we still encourage you to follow the speakers' presentations, and please share any comments, thoughts, or resources you might think that are useful for all of us. So let's go into the program. Building an enabling, inclusive, and healthy environment that keeps children safe from all forms of violence is a crucial aspect of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and for the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And ensuring a robust, rights-based approach to child safeguarding across different sectors is essential to achieving this. The development and implementation of these child safeguarding policies, codes of conduct, and accountability mechanisms are all part of this very important process. It is equally important to ensure that children participate heavily, safely, and meaningfully in these actions, and that child-sensitive mechanisms and channels exist to report incidents of violence and harm whenever and wherever it might occur. In today's event, we have representatives from key stakeholders to share their experiences and learning in building a stronger culture of child safeguarding in their contexts. The first panel of this event will focus on the commitment and the policy framework of governments and civil society. We'll have then a second panel, which will discuss the implementation of safeguarding policies and the critical role of children's participation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass the microphone to Ms. Najat Malamjid, the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, to moderate this first panel. Madam Malamjid, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miguel. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear children and young people and colleagues, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to co-host this event with the World Organization of the Scout Movement, represented today by my dear friend Ahmed Al-Handeli, its Secretary General. This is another step in our strong collaboration on children's protection from violence. I would also like to express my sincere appreciation to the Permanent Mission of Ireland and the Dominican Republic for their support. Ensuring a strong culture of child safeguarding is essential to guaranteeing every child's right to freedom from violence and discrimination. Everyone has a role to play. All public and private institutions and organizations working for and with children must ensure that they keep all children safe from all forms of violence in all settings. Discussion about child safeguarding often happen in relation to a specific sector or setting, such as in education, care settings, sporting organization, religious institution, community organization, the online world, or in the context of travel and tourism. But we know that these different contexts can present similar safeguarding challenges. Today's event provides an opportunity for us to all to learn from the experience of different actors in different settings. This first panel, as highlighted by Miguel, will look at frameworks for strengthening action on child safeguarding from the perspective of national governments and from civil society. Our first speaker will be Mr. Ahmed Al-Handeli, Secretary General of the World Organization of Scouts Movement. Ahmed, please tell us about your experience, the experience of Scouts Movement, about how you have strengthened your safeguarding frameworks. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Najat. It's wonderful to connect with all the friends, excellencies, participants, delegates. It gives me a great pleasure, in fact, to today on behalf of the World Organization of the Scout Movement to team up with the Office of the SRSG on Violence Against Children. And let me commend you, Dr. Najat, for your strong leadership. Probably one good story to share with all of you. In her first week in office, Dr. Najat joined us at the biggest scouting event, the World Scout Jamboree in West Virginia, bringing together over 50,000 young people from 150 countries. And her message of inspiration of the need really to listen and work with young people and children and to prioritize the question of child protection resonated massively with our membership. And since then, we have been collaborating very closely with her office. For scouting, for over 114 years, we have been working with and for young people by advancing opportunities of non-formal education and unlocking these opportunities for their developments and their societies. Scouting is one of the largest youth organizations in the world today, with 172 national scout organizations combined. They serve 57 million young people. So as you can see from the numbers, we almost have all countries, we're close to all countries in the United Nations. At the same time, we continue growing. In fact, we have witnessed 12% growth over the past 4 years. So although it's an old youth movement, but it's a movement that's growing and connecting with more young people and more communities. The question of safeguarding and what we call safe from harm in scouting is quite central for us at the moment, because with 114 years, you don't only empower young people, but you accumulate a lot of learnings and experiences over the years that shows you what works and what doesn't work. And over the years, as we have had many successes, we also had failures at points of in the past where our system really didn't catch up enough with the trends among young people and children to make sure that they are safe and protected at all times. Luckily, we have enhanced considerably and benefited from a lot of these experiences in different cultures. And today's scouting, and just concluded the World Scout Conference, our kind of General Assembly of all the 172 National Scout organizations. And one of the key priorities we're advancing today is the question of safe from harm, child protection. And we would like to make sure that over the next 4 years, we bring the 172 National Scout organization to the highest level of compliance with safe from harm and child protection mechanisms at the national level. What we are witnessing today in Scouting is not really limited to Scouting as a movement, but we're seeing that for many other youth organizations and many other providers of education opportunities, including the formal education systems, which they are falling short to really understanding the challenges that are facing children and young people. We used to think that homes and classes or classrooms are safer places for young people and children. And we have a lot of evidence today showing that a lot of bullying and a lot of threats for children are happening in places that they were supposed to be safe spaces for them in the past. It's my firm belief, in fact, that today we can work with experts, and we need this expertise. But until we have the humility to recognize that actually children themselves are the experts when it comes to their safety, and we have to listen to them, and we have to really understand their experiences. Children are the experts because a lot of the forms of violence exercised against children today are happening in new realities that most of us haven't experienced in our when we were children or in our early youth. We're seeing the leveraging of cyberbullying and the way that young people are communicating and what's happening in the spaces of the formal education system as some of the challenges that are taking new forms that only require from all of us to empower children and youth to be able to speak out and to tell us about these experiences, and for our systems and mechanisms not to be so rigid that they do not really speak to the realities and the challenges faced by children and young people. So in Scouting, we have that deep commitment really to learn, to share our learnings, our experiences, but also to share some of the failures and how we have improved over the years and how we can make sure that a movement that has empowered hundreds of millions over the years would be able today to remain relevant and offer a safe space for young people. By teaming up with the Office of the SRSG on violence against children, we are committed to learning from the experience and the technical expertise you offer, Dr. Najat and your team, to ensure that we are able to lead by example as a movement, also by transferring this knowledge to other organizations in the sector. I have to commend also all member states who have been emphasizing the mandate of your office, because just looking at today at the support of Ireland and the Dominican Republic, and in fact, I have in particular to commend also my colleagues Luz at the Dominican Republic mission for years of supporting the agenda of youth and protection of children. I think we need more member states to continue putting this agenda front and center. From our side, we will continue pushing from the civil society perspective and the youth organizations. What we're witnessing today are new forms of violence are exercised against children, and requiring from all of us to have the humility, as I said, to listen more, to recognize the expertise and the knowledge and the experiences of young people and children themselves, and to make sure that our organizations offer the platform for them to speak out, and also for the national laws and the various spaces for advocacies to reflect their experiences and to their ideas of how we can ensure that the world will offer a safe space for children and youth. So thank you so much for the discussion today. I look very much forward to hearing from all the experts and this exchange of ideas. And it's a tremendous honor for us in Scouting to team up with your office to offer this space. I look very much forward to learning from all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. And first, I want really to commend you and your team with regard to your strong commitment, leadership, and also the huge work done. And I just want, I'm not going to summarize what you were telling, but you highlight the need really to make sure that children are really involved in all the amendments you made, in the constitution that you changed, you know, empowering and making children safe from harm is also listening to them and seeing them as experts and part of the solution. And I think what you show that it's possible, it's not easy, but it's possible. And as you remind, you are one of the biggest organizations worldwide working with and for children. And your example could be shared, scaled up. We can make it and we must make it. And many, many thanks really, Ahmed, for all the commitment. And you know that we are going to work really more and more together, because the most important challenge is implementing and monitoring, as we know. Our next speaker is Mrs. Olga Dinia Liaverias, directora de Niños, Niñas y Adolescentes de la Procuraduría General de la República Dominicana. Mrs. Dinia Liaverias, how is the government of Dominican Republic working with industry on child safeguarding, especially in your experience working with the tourism industry? Olga, you have the floor.
Gracias, gracias. Me gustaría primero agradecer, ¿me escuchan bien?
Yes.
¿Me pueden escuchar?
Sí, sí, sí.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
Okay. Primero quiero agradecer a la Oficina del Representante Especial sobre Violencia contra Niños, a la señora Nayad Mahala Majid, al Movimiento de Scout Mundial por la organización. Para la República Dominicana es un verdadero honor el poder participar y el hecho de que estemos reunidos aquí para la protección infantil, para los niños, con los niños y los niños. Desde el Gobierno Central de la República Dominicana, pues agradecemos la oportunidad de poder participar en esta importante actividad. El mundo ha impactado, pues ha sido impactado por la pandemia del COVID-19 y esta pandemia pues dejó más atrás a quienes ya se encontraban.
So the pandemic was really letting people behind and was very hard. But this year, 2021, we could keep on with the agenda, especially in this particular area in the world. Protecting all kids and young people in all situations. All the Human Rights Convention are included in this agreement. So in the Republic, each part of this agreement is included in the agenda for the country. This law included all the vulnerabilities that could be affected for kids, like traffic, abuse, or all kinds of harm that could be done to them. Especially in the area of tourism, we try to keep their rights, like domestic violence and abuse, or even job situation for job people. So next August, this August, nearly 3 million tourists were registered visiting the Dominican Republic. And we have to keep in mind that the tourism here is very varied, very different, sport tourism, cultural tourism. So this makes that the kids can be in very different types of vulnerability. So a new committee was created to address this problem. Work groups working together with the institutions were developed this year, like some women and children committees to protect this kind of situation. all the protocols we created to allow them or to facilitate the news of the situation from the kids. So this way we can achieve the greatest way of creating a safe space for the children, or at least create the channels so they can communicate with the authorities or with the committees or work groups that could help them in their situation. So this will really allow us to create some other resources and also to visibilize this situation in children, to even spread the awareness to other areas like the future situation of the planet, climate change, which are linked to their human rights, as we all know. The government of the Dominican Republic is really interested and has really included this point in their agenda, as they think one of the main points of their society is to protect children. So the main parts of this policy is to eradicate the harm that could be done to children by creating new processes of detection or prevention to their situations that could become a vulnerable one. Thank you very much for being here and for listening to me.
Muchas gracias, Mrs. Llaverias, for sharing a Dominican Republic experience. I have the privilege to be in your country many years ago when Dominican Republic adopted the Code of Conduct on Travel and Tourism. And I had also the privilege to meet the First Lady, recently, and, highlighting all this strong political commitment. And really what is important, because you start by the pandemic and its impact on children, protection, but also I think building the impact on tourism, but also you highlight the fact that tourism is going to restart. And I think here we must recognize that building back better for the tourism industry is an opportunity to build a new tourism and travel that is safe, inclusive, healthy, and resilient. And as part of the process, we must continue also to promote the ratification of the Framework Convention on Tourism Ethics and the implementation of call for action of the 2018 International Summit on Child Protection in Travel and Tourism in Bogota. I just want to highlight your strong commitment and the political commitment at high level, but also I am very happy that it's, a high level representative of justice who is speaking about regulation in tourism and travel, that it means also highlight the role of state. Many, many thanks. Our next speaker is Mrs. Michelle Clark, Chief Social Worker, Department of Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth of Ireland. You have a long title. Huh? Mrs. Clark, please tell us about experience and legislation related to child safeguarding. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your kind invitation to speak today, and to the World Organization for Scouts for facilitating this meeting. Keeping children safe is every child's right and everyone's business. Shame and secrecy are enablers of child abuse and child violence, and meetings such as this will help prevent violence, will empower children, their carers, and the adults responsible in the world in which they live, create a safer world. Next slide, please. Ireland, like many countries, has over the past number of decades experienced disclosures of abuse in institutions and organizations. The impact of such truths have changed our society. Time does not allow me to chart this journey over the last 3 decades, but it has been truly significant. Now, over time, it became clear that not all organizations were implementing the reforming voluntary codes of conduct. And indeed, some organizations were seen to favor their reputation over child safety. As a result of this, in 2015, the government decided that it was necessary to make it absolutely clear that the people of the country prioritise child safety, and the Children First Act 2015 was passed. Next slide, please. Now, a government cannot legislate for cultural change, but it can provide a framework to support such changes. And the legislative framework has 3 parts. The first, which I'll be speaking about in a few moments in more detail, is each organisation that provides services or works with children has to develop a child safeguarding statement. And by law, organisations are deemed responsible for the safety of children in their care. The second part of the framework was that the responsibility for child safety was a whole of government response. It didn't belong in one department or in one agency or with one profession. It was for everybody. And the government departments had to be accountable to the Parliament on a regular basis, and all government funding was dependent on compliance with child safety. And the third part was the professionals and organisations who worked with children were deemed legally obliged to report child abuse. So the legislation was really seeking to balance between reporting of abuse and preventing violence against children. Next slide, please. So child safeguarding statements. So when they're developed and reviewed properly, I think they can be the tangible evidence of a culture of safety in an organisation, or to show how an organisation is trying to be as safe as it can be. Now, the statement in itself will not keep children safe, but making the statement everybody's business within the organisation makes child safety everybody's business, and that really helps. So how does this happen? Well, leaders need to promote a culture of children's rights and child safety in the small ways as much as the big ways, identifying and dealing with bullying amongst adults and amongst children and from adults to children, accepting that child safety is everybody's business means that everybody has to be involved in developing the statement. And that's where the earlier comments, the very wise comments that were made about the place of children in telling people what makes them safe and what keeps them safe, that they are the lead participants in developing these statements. And I've been working in the area for a very long time, and I have never failed to be impressed with the clarity and fairness with which children will tell you what's happening in organisations, either which they live in or which they participate in. Now, the process of developing the statement also make it very clear that the organisation recognises on an ongoing basis that there is the potential for violence and abuse against children, and that nobody could ever say, oh, I never thought it could happen here. We have to be really clear that there is an alertness to this. The solutions to identify risk and to decrease the risk to children should be within the organisations. Now, it's very easy to get in a consultant perhaps, or to take a statement off a shelf, but it has to be developed with the actual organisation in mind for it to work properly. It doesn't mean guidance can be provided, but it really has to be owned as a living document and as a living guidance for all working in the organisation. And of course, risk will be dependent on the nature of the organisation and its activities. Risk can come from other children as well as from adults. It can be online as well as on-site. And so it's continually evolving. Organisations who ensure that children are heard and who deal with small everyday complaints and bullying, who encourage peer and upward challenge, are already on their way to becoming safe organisations. Child safety has to be relevant and dynamic. It has to be referred to frequently, reviewed and challenged to be assistance to children in organisations. Next slide, please. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this, but these are the actual legal requirements in the Act for Child Safety Statement, because legislation has to be precise. So I leave those there and move on to my final slide, if I might. And so the next slide, this is really to say, well, is it working? Does it work? So I think in this, we have to look at what are the levers for change? What about culture for change? In our first and revising and seeing how safety is developing, training and support are a huge driver for local managers and staff. Online guidance can be very useful and it can be applied. Making funding dependent on demonstration of the priorities of safety is a great lever. It really assists, it really focuses minds. Organizational reputation is extremely important. Positive reputations for organizations that are very active and negative reputations for those who do not participate. And we have mechanisms for publishing the names of organizations that do not comply. Now, organizations are giving lots of opportunities and given a lot of support, but that works very well, particularly perhaps with some for-profit organizations that generally see themselves outside of the net of government prescription. So keeping children safe at the top of the agenda is crucial, be that at government level, at national organisation, or at having it as a standing agenda item at regular meetings, weekly meetings in local groups. It can never be assumed that everything's fine now and we can let it go and move on to something else. It has to be constantly there. We have to be constantly vigilant to ensure that children are kept free from violence and safe. So to conclude, I'd like to say that the structures to improve child safety will, of course, be different all over the world. And the devices and the drives for the change will reflect local and national strengths. However, what is not different across the world is that all children have the right to be safe from violence. And it is all our business to support safe organizations. Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot, Mrs. Clark, for sharing with us the experience in Ireland. I just want to highlight some points that I think are very, very useful regarding all the legislation frameworks that make mandatory child safeguarding, mandatory reporting of abuse and violation, and also what you highlight. It's not only about having a wonderful paper, child safeguarding, it's about the ownership and to make it, as a tool that it's evolving, that it's subject to monitoring, to reevaluation, involving children themselves. And the last point is about, accountability, and this is very, very important, and all the way related to disclosure, transparency. And I will conclude by what you told regarding the culture is making child safety everyone's business. This is very important. Many thanks for your statement. Our next speaker is Mr. Conrad de Beer, Head of Child Safeguarding SOS Children Village International. Mr. de Beer, how is SOS Children's Village addressing the issue of child safeguarding, including risks associated with children in the care setting? You have the floor, Conrad. Over to you.
Thank you, Najat. Thank you to all the other panelists. I'm sorry to say that SOS Children's Village's CEO Ingrid Johansson had hoped to be here with us, but sadly that is not possible. Nonetheless, I'm pleased to be able to step in. Child safeguarding is a tremendously important topic to us and indeed to many organizations throughout the world. Earlier this year, we published the report of an independent child safeguarding review. The purpose of this review was to examine past cases and to learn and improve our safeguarding. We had commissioned the expert organization, Keeping Children Safe, to conduct the review, and we published their report in June. The report delivered some very difficult and painful truths. Keeping Children Safe identified some significant organizational failures. There were cases where not only did we fail to keep children safe, but we failed to respond to those incidents appropriately. We failed to uphold our own policies and procedures, and we failed to hold some perpetrators accountable. I don't need to go into any further detail. The report is there for all to read on our website. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because one of the driving motivations behind conducting this very challenging review and publishing the report on our website was to share our learnings with others, to contribute to the global understanding, so that together we can all make the world a safer place for children and young people. We've learned a lot of lessons, not just from the review alone, but from recent years of experience as well. Keeping children safe contributed a lot to that learning. They made 46 recommendations in their report, and we are responding to them all by implementing a safeguarding action plan, which is also published on our website. The details of our action plan may not be directly relevant to all of you, but some of the broader lessons learned surely are. So I want to share a few of them with you here. Lesson 1 is quite simply, listen. When children and young people come forward with concerns and allegations, listen to them. Listen with an open mind and put them at the center of your response. Listen to children and young people also in developing programs. Listen to their ideas when designing measures for preventing, reporting, and responding to abuse. So your policies and procedures keep children and young people at the center. Lesson 2 is be open. Ultimately, what we are trying to create in SOS Children's Villages is an open environment in which those who experience or know about abuse feel free to come forward. When we published the independent review, we also invited anyone with concerns to come forward. This has been a positive step towards changing our organizational culture, encouraging openness by being open. Be open also by bringing in experts, such as keeping children safe, to help you understand your risks and how to respond. We are the direct caregiver for about 65,000 children worldwide. This means when we talk about safeguarding, we have a high risk profile. We are open about those risks, what went wrong, and what we need to do to improve. Since publishing the independent review, we have had some very valuable discussions with partners, realistic discussions about the challenging environments in which we work and how we need to do better. Openness strengthens relationships as well as our shared resolve to deliver on our mission. Our challenges are compounded by the fact that we work in 137 countries and territories around the world. Driving change in this environment requires painstaking effort, and yes, it takes time. Our safeguarding action plan takes a holistic approach, not just improving policies and procedures, but also tackling gaps in program quality and creating a more open organizational culture through an updated code of conduct and other human resources policies. All of these need to be properly developed with training and guidance for all of our member associations. One final lesson is this: safeguarding is never finished. We have been on a continual journey towards better safeguarding since SOS Children's Villages was founded in 1949. We can and must always strive to do better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conrad. And thank you. We already worked together regarding this report. I want first to congratulate you, because I think when we are speaking about child rights protection and promotion, we are accountable. This is very important. And having this independent child safeguarding review is a process of monitoring. And I think it's important, as you told, safeguarding never finished and has to be improved. The other point is regarding disclosure. This is very important, and to use it, as to build lessons learned, to share it. And really, I congratulate you. And the last but not the least is listening to children. And this is very, very important, but also, ending impunity of perpetrator. And I think this is really important. Many, many thanks to you. And we will continue to work closely with you. And really, I am happy to really to hear about all this ongoing, and because for me, the reputation, no organization is immune worldwide. This, we have to really be in alert mode and listening and trust children also and their voices. Thank you so much. So if I am not wrong, I will take, we have some enough time. I'm not sure that we have some question from the floor, but I have a couple of questions. And I would like to ask first, if you allow me, to Michelle and Olga. How do you develop a government-wide commitment on child safeguarding? Any advice? Because I think this is important. You are representing both the governments. Please, if you can do it in one sentence, each one. Michelle, Olga, you have the floor.
Well, I would say it's difficult. And I would say having the leadership from the Prime Minister at the top. It's about leadership and commitment. Drivers obviously can be reports of disclosures and which gain public support, but you really need to have political commitment from the top. Yeah. Olga?
Olga, you have the floor.
Sí. Bueno, pues perfecto.
Well,
el primero no
perfect. I would like to say, firstly, that we have a great government that is really engaged in this child protection area. So in an institutional level, in all levels of this government, we are really working together in work groups and sitting down in order to be coherent in all our policies. So that way, we can be sure that all our resources are focused on the right paths. So creating these policies of prevention, we really wanted to be a little faster in this process, so we could take advantage of the other organizations that could help us. And we really would want to thank the Scout movement for the assistance and the cooperation they've given us. So we can all at national level could provide a protection program for them.
Yes, we need leadership, political, commitment at the top level, translated in action and not a slogan. Many thanks, and sure we will continue to work together. My next question is for Ahmed and Conrad. What can you tell to inspire fellow civil society organizations to encourage them to develop an organization-wide safeguarding policy? One center for each one, please. You have the floor.
Actually, it's easy. I'll borrow one from Conrad with the SOS villages, is to listen and not to be embarrassed as well, to also show your vulnerability. I mean, what you have done and reaching out and asking others to come in and to help you. There are lots of blind spots for any provider or any frontliners working with young people and children when it comes to child safety. And we have to get uncomfortable as well before we reform some of these blind spots. So I think listen and confront the reality that you don't know what you don't know.
Thank you, Conrad.
Yeah, absolutely. Is to be courageous and to be open and honest about the challenges that one faces on the organization. It is also critical for each and every stakeholder and a person who holds certain responsibility, particularly on governance, leadership, and staff level, for them to know and to understand what their responsibilities are to keep children safe. Also critical is to also engage children not only as recipients, but also active participants in initiatives to create a safe environment. Those are important policy considerations.
Thank you both so much. I am not going to summarize. Children as active participant, courage, honesty, assuming responsibility, and listening and opening eyes. So there is one question from the floor, but due to the time, we will address it during, our discussion, because we will have a more wide discussion after the second panel. Thank you to all of you for your active engagement and frank discussion. And this concludes the first panel, but you have to stay because we will have other questions addressed to you. And over to you, Miguel.
Thank you very much, Dr. Malamjid, for moderating this enlightening and very important discussion. And before we move to the next panel, as you were just mentioning, it's critical for us to understand your thoughts, your comments, your questions. So please don't be shy. Use the chat feature that you can see on the Zoom dashboard and share resources, comments, thoughts, and even questions, so that we can then address them, direct them to the panelists that are participating in this event. I would like now to move to the next panel, which will discuss the implementation of safeguarding policies and the role of children in creating those policies. I would like now to pass the microphone to Ms. Sarah Rita Cotton, who will be moderating the second panel. Ms. Cotton is a Scout leader who is serving as the Vice Chairperson of the World Scout Committee. Ms. Cotton, Mrs. Cotton, it's a pleasure to have you today. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miguel. So as introduced, the second panel is going to focus on the process of strengthening child safeguarding at the national level and at a local level. So moving on to the very perspective of implementation at national and local levels. And we will be here 4 panelists, including who have actively participated in this process. Now, before again, just to link it again to the first panel and to what we've been discussing, we've seen how much the goal of ensuring a safe environment is really common to all youth organizations, and we all are active, at least here, in making sure that we can ensure that safe environment. We had a lot of work that was done. I can talk about WOSM, for example, the World Organization of the Scout Movement, where we had our constitution amended the safe environment for adults and young people that is embedded in its constitution. But there's many that are working really on having safeguarding and ensuring a safe environment as the highest priority. We talked about transparency, we talked about listening, but that doesn't happen if we don't work also at national and local level on the cultures that we have, on how people can actually change and make sure they can actually react properly when one of the cases of abuse happens, and they can prevent it from happening. That responsibility falls upon us as well as the young people and children, because they are also active participants in their own development, in their own creation of a safe environment around them. So talking about this, I mean, of course, when we talk about policy on safe from harm, for example, we have a lot that deals with the educational aspect of creating the safe environment, but also the structure aspect. But how does this make sense practically? So we know that we need to, when cases happen, and we need to prevent them from happening. In terms of reactions, for example, when we talk about reporting systems, procedures that need to be in place, we do work really on making sure that witnesses of abuse and people that undergo some abuse are able to report them, are able to go to a listening ear, to be safe in reporting the abuse, because young people would not feel that comfortable doing that if we're not in that culture of awareness, of comfort that allows them to actually do that. On the other side, look at our events. For example, in scouting, we have various big events of 50,000 scouts, for example, in a camp. Also, we have online events and digital events that have more than 1 million and 2 million people, like Jota Joti. And those online events need another type of reporting system and understanding that is supported, of course, by e-learnings to be able to make sure bullying and other types of happen online are also reported and made sure that they are actually prevented from happening. So that is supported by e-learnings, by trainings that we give to young people and adults to make sure they know how to recognize an abuse and how to actually report it. On the other side, on the prevention side, and not just the reaction side, we already addressed this, but we really need to equip our young people with the skills they need and the awareness they need to have to be able to create themselves safe environments. And that happens through activities, toolkits, different kinds of abuse and how we can actually prevent them from happening. And of course, programs that are supported by facilitators that need to go also through that training. So that kind of support that we give for our young people to be able to recognize the abuse, to be able to act upon it, to be able to make sure that they do not have any case of abuse that happens around them. And if it does, that they can take an action on it and not just as spectators, but really be an active participant in making sure this is dealt with as in like, let's keep it aside, let's not talk about it, that's taboo or not something that we can talk about, but be transparent about come and talk about it. So that kind of educational proposal that we give to young people is actually to prepare them for future challenges in life. And that's what our youth movements and scouting particularly is about. It's an educational youth movement that allows young to really be equipped to be able to be prepared for the future. And the first thing that they need prepared for is really making sure that they create that safe environment, that they can take the lead in making sure they are really there to support other people in fighting this battle. And to be able to do that, we need to pair education, cultural change, and mechanisms and processes. So structural changes are really important, but the educational aspect is super important as well to make sure people and young people, and of course the people that are in their programs, can achieve their full potential. And that's our ability as youth movements to be the leaders of change and to lead by example in child and youth protection. So that's a brief introduction to jump to this level of discussion at this point, but let's really now listen to our young speakers and hear from them on how they were involved as young people to be able to be part of a child and youth protection awareness and policies and work in their own organizations. So our first speaker is Winnie from New Zealand. Winnie is 17 and she's a member of the National Council for Scouts New Zealand. Winnie, hello, Winnie. So it's really a pleasure to have you here, and we would really like to know from you, how was the process of strengthening child safeguarding developed at the national level in your organization, Scouts New Zealand, and what role did you have in it? Winnie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It is my right to be kept safe. It is my right to express my view. It is my right for you to listen to me. And when you make decisions, my view should be valued and considered. Kia ora tātou, my name is Winnie Tapoatea. I'm 17 years old and from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm a member of the Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand Youth Advisory Group, a venturer, and a Queen Scout. All young people have the right to be involved with decisions that impact them. And in Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand, we have made the first few steps to achieve one of our organisational goals. We aim to achieve an organisational culture that allows all children and young people to have a real influence in our safety and well-being. I'm here to tell you how, in a few simple steps, young people like me can have a real say in what our organisation does to help keep young people safe from harm. I was able to have my voice heard because Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand created a way to gather feedback and views from me and other young people. They listened to our viewpoints and took them seriously, and they made real changes in response to our views and feedback. I'm a founding member of the Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand Youth Advisory Group. This group is set up to provide the organisation with a mechanism to gather feedback and views from youth members. We meet on a regular basis to review many different aspects of how the movement works and address important issues. Part of our work has been to support the development of the safeguarding and protection policy. We ensured that the policy was relevant and able to be understood by young people. We worked through the policy to make sure that the wording was easily understandable by children so that they could know what their rights are and what they should be able to expect from the adults that care for them, and where they should go for help if they feel unsafe. We also made sure that the mediums in which the policy was being put out to children were engaging so that the resources would reach more children, thus helping them understand the policy. This included creating a yellow youth card to be a quick and accessible resource that every young person in Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand has a copy of. The yellow youth card outlines what young people should expect from adults and where they can go for help if they feel like this isn't happening. We also made a short animated video, which I voiced to help those who may not be able to read understand the information that is on the card. My involvement in the youth advisory group has made me feel empowered and appreciated. The organization actively and intentionally asked for our opinions and then actually listened to what we had to say and took our opinions seriously. This made me feel like my voice mattered and what I had to say was valuable. One of the challenges was making sure that we were fully informed on what we were giving feedback on before our meetings, and so we had the chance to process our opinions before sharing them with the organization. Another challenge that Scouts Aotearoa is currently coming to terms with is giving young people like me the opportunity to have meaningful input on the development and of the policy and procedures. We currently do this by having intentional positions for young people on all levels of the movement, including positions for under 26-year-olds on our board, National Council, and by having a youth and governance movement network that actively contributes to the governance of the organization. Communication in ways that are appropriate for young people is important to ensuring all young people are able to contribute in the most effective way. I think it is incredibly important for young people to be given the opportunity to be a part of shaping the organizations they're involved with, especially when it comes to our safety and well-being. By involving young people in this process, we're able to create policies that are fit for purpose and work for the people they're intending to protect. Every adult across the world must commit to keeping children and young people safe to empower them to keep themselves and their peers safe, for it is everyone's responsibility to keep everyone safe from harm. Only by working together in an intergenerational partnership are we truly able to achieve this dream. This has been a journey for Scouts Aotearoa New Zealand, and we have had some bumps along the way. We are committed to continuously improving our systems and getting as close as we can to empowering every child to have a voice. If you take one thing away from today, I hope you take away the belief that young people have views, know themselves and what they need better than anyone else. We create more effective policies when we involve young people in the process of developing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Thank you for that presentation. I mean, really, when we talk about hearing young people and taking their feedback actively and making sure they are part of policy making, I mean, that's amazing skills young people can get with, and how much they can actually be part of the decision-making processes and be in shaping their own futures by creating safe environments and, of course, learning other skills along the way. So thanks a lot. Now, next speaker is going to be Nathan from Malawi. Nathan is 15 and a member of the International Young Catholic Students. Nathan, tell us more about your experience with strengthening safeguarding within the faith-based setting. What were the challenges you were facing?
Thank you very much. My name is Nathan Simango. I'm 15 years old and I'm a Malawian, and I'll be representing International Young Catholic Students. I'll be making a presentation on child safeguarding policies for children and with children, but focusing on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. To start with, the implementation of safeguarding policies and the role of children's participation has never been more important than now when the world is faced with the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. The outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic led to the closure of schools, lockdowns, travel restrictions, and difficulty for children to access critical services. This has led to dangerous increase in violence against children, especially as schools where safe places are closed and access to critical protection and psychosocial services are severely affected. The COVID-19 pandemic response also greatly impacted the implementation and children's participation in safeguarding policies. Firstly, governments and development actors focused their efforts towards managing their health crisis and recovering their economies. Secondly, protection and safeguarding wasn't prioritized with limited government funding allocated to it, as most resources were diverted towards health emergency and bailing out the economy. Thirdly, children are not involved, consulted, or participated in planning, development, as well as implementation of the priorities. For instance, No government in the world consulted children about school closures, and yet the brunt of the effects of this decision was faced by children. The International Young Catholic Students is an international Catholic organization recognized by the Vatican as a private international association of the faithful, and thus considered a faith-based organization. The Catholic Church has been repeatedly robbed by child sexual abuse over the last 3 decades. And recent inquiries into the historical Catholic Church abuse of children paints a sad and painful picture, characterized by victim blaming, negligence, deficiency, silence, and an institutional cover-up. For instance, the church not only failed to prevent abuse, but had also failed to report it, at times knowingly, putting children in contact with predators. However, there is hope that things are changing with the direct leadership of Pope Francis, where the church has instituted several safeguarding measures globally. In February 2019, the Pope led a landmark summit on clerical sexual abuse and lifted a controversial rule of pontifical secrecy to improve transparency. In March 2019, the Pope issued Vatican Law number 297, the Apostolic Letter, and guidelines on the protection of minors. And this led to the development of the Charter for the Protection for Children and Young People at national level by the Episcopal Conferences. On 1st June 2021, Pope Francis changed the Roman Catholic Church's laws to explicitly criminalize sexual abuse. The new rules make sexual abuse, grooming minors for sex, possessing child pornography, and covering abuse a criminal offense. The new rules come into effect on 8 December this year. In my country, Malawi, and most countries in Africa, protection laws and safeguarding policies are under criminal law. However, the enforcement of these laws is poor, and children were not involved in the development of these laws and policies. At national level, we participate in the advocacy for the revision and implementation of these policies through our national YCS movement and other children's platforms. Even with the good process made by the Catholic Church, the development of these safeguarding policies had very low participation of children. However, the children actively participate in their implementation through church movements like the International Young Catholic Students, whose own safeguarding policy was developed by children like myself. We continue to advocate for the inclusion of children in the development or revision of these safeguarding policies. The role of children's participation in the development and implementation of safeguarding policies is very important if we are to break the vicious cycle of violence against children, because today's children are tomorrow's adults. So, children's involvement today leads to awareness, behavior change, and preparedness, which guarantees the success of safeguarding in the future. Therefore, although all intentioned by adults, there should be nothing for us without us. That is, no development implementation on safeguarding policies for children without children. This is the only way to achieve the leaving no one behind principle at the heart of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And in the development of child safeguarding policies, we have been faced with a number of challenges, and we would like to see some improvements. One of these challenges is working with adults. The most challenging aspect of working with adults in the process has been that getting the adults to listen to children. And this was the most challenging aspect, because adults have a misconception that they always know what is best for children. However, only children know what is best for us. Therefore, working with children to develop and implement safeguarding policies is a very good investment for the future, because the children today are the adults of tomorrow. So, meaningfully, involving children today means that they'll be better prepared for the future implementation of these child protection and safeguarding policies. And in my country and the Catholic Church, I would like to see a safe environment and meaningful participation of children to be able to take care and protect the weakest and defenseless members of the society. I would like to see more children involved to amplify their voices so that children can influence the development as well as implementation safeguarding policies. Simply put, nothing for children without children. With this, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Nathan. That was a very comprehensive also explanation and presentation. I mean, we saw the challenges that you're facing, definitely, but we also hear the sentence, today's children are as adults, and the way they behave today will really lead the way in their behavior afterwards. The change that we need to do. We need to make sure our adults and our children are both together getting the information and the training needed to be able to make a change and be transparent and actively work towards creating that safe environment. Thanks a lot. Now, we will now switch to our last speaker here, Mrs. Pilar Molen. Mrs. Pilar Molen is a legal advisor of the Federation of Football of Chile. Pilar, you will tell us here about the process of implementing the recent safeguarding legislation in the Football Federation of Chile. So can you enlighten us about this and how did this go? The floor is yours. You're on mute still.
Ahora sí. Hola, muchas gracias.
Hello, thank you so much. I want to thank the invitation to be able to listen to this experience in other countries, and I will share with you ours. My name is Pilar Maulen. I'm a legal advisor of the Chilean Federation of Football. We have the experience with different clubs, with different teams, and thanks to this coordinating work of the football environment and the leaders, the players, and the different associations of workers and the Chilean government, we count with a tool that is being fundamental to implement a change in our type of organizations in which we put first the children instead of the athletes. So the government of Chile created a protocol to prevent the damage against children. So personally, I have to study this protocol just to apply it in football. And this under FIFA that has been applying different protocols. And we have, this is kind of different because this is an act for children. And this is just kind of different because children and youth people are recognized as persons that has different rights, and these have to follow
el principio de igualdad y no discriminación, y el principio de autonomía progresiva y el derecho a
different topics that are established in other protocols, like international protocols.
para que estas personas se eduquen
So the main goal is that people has to educate themselves to apply different measures to educate everyone involved in the education and the different policies that are adopted just to make the different reports and complaints in these topics. So also we have to improve different places where children work and where children are. For example, different rooms, and we have different protocols for the people that is in the room. For example, if you don't have you can be alone with a child as an adult, and that kind of things and changes, and we have been provided by the FIFA different protocols and different kind of laws and measurements just to design different policies. For example, the travel policies when you travel with children, the private rooms, for example, for children. So the dressing rooms also, so children can participate actively in these processes. So this is a long way and we are just starting. And implies a work of re-education in what it means to put children first. So it's a very long way, it's a very long road, but I think that if we make a commitment, it's easy to achieve. So thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure just to listen to the previous speaker. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pilar. And again, I mean, it really shows how much we need to what we think of in policies to practicalities and protocols in our own areas where we have children, where we have adults. And I think your sentence, the child before the athlete, is really an important one to keep in mind all the time. We want them really to develop as to achieve their full potential even. So this panel was very instructive and very helpful, understanding also how we can actually really continuously improve, how we can look forward, and how we can make sure we share our best practices amongst each other to ensure safeguarding policies and a safe environment for everyone, and particularly children and young people. So thank you to the three panelists. Now I'm going to give the floor back to Dr. Najat Mallam Majid, who will be facilitating the open floor segment, which we're hoping that the panelists of the two panels will interact, of course. So Najat, please go ahead. The floor is.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Sure, we are moving now to the open discussion, and we will be taking a few minutes. And I will start by two questions coming from the floor, and it's addressed to all of you, panelists of the first panel and the second panel. One question was about, the youth protection and children protection requires, many key actors that are involved and inter-organizational response. And it's, but the problem is data protection policies that could interfere with transparency. And what the question is, does panel have advice on how to overcome this challenge? And I want to link it also to the seal of confession regarding also all the Catholic Church. So my question is addressed to all of you, adults mostly, and please let me know who is going to respond. Michelle, Ahmed, Conrad, Pilar, Olga. So whom? Please, Michelle.
Thank you. This question came up when we were considering our mandatory reporting legislation. And basically, we are treating priests like anybody else. As far as the civil law is concerned, everybody must report. I think the church may take a different view, but our view is that these are matters for the civil law, not for the church law. And if I could just add, sorry, our Prime Minister at the time when he withdrew our ambassador to the Vatican for a number of years to indicate Ireland's unhappiness with how the church had not complied with voluntary safeguarding arrangements. It was a very serious step. So yes, we've had to confront this.
Thank you, Michelle. Ahmed, Conrad, you want to react?
Yeah, I think that from my perspective, if I can add, let me go back to the point around the data and the question of transparency that wasn't a question. I think in our experience, some of the problems we are facing when it comes to really assessing the situation and better understanding the reality of our national scout organizations comes really not as much with the transparency, but it's really with the question also of capacity and the know-how. I mean, getting some of the youth workers and people who are working with youth to better understand their responsibility, and coming also by providing them with the tools and the technical expertise, so they will be able to contribute to a global monitoring mechanism, for example. As Sarah mentioned earlier, one of the things we are working on at the moment in scouting is to achieve full compliance with our standards safe from harm by having a tracking tool looking at all the 172 national scout organizations. So providing them with tools and resources, but also coming to look at their compliance, and anyone who would fail to comply would be basically at some point expelled from the movement if they are not in full compliance. Now that's the intention, but I can tell you the challenge comes really of establishing a culture where you will be able to empower those workers with you to know how to report, to know exactly how to translate some of the lofty policies to actually an actual reporting that would make sense, and that would also put young people and children at the center by listening to them. And I can tell you, Dr. Najat, I think any reporting mechanism that will rely only on adults reporting about their how great the safe from harm mechanisms that we have would fall short really in understanding what the challenge is. For me, any future reporting mechanism would need to be inclusive enough to ensure that children, like the ones we heard on the second panel, they have a views also and giving their opinions about whether these systems are functional or not. So it's not so much about transparency, but it's really, it is that component, not to underestimate that, but we find also a question of capacity to be equally of concern.
Thank you, Ahmed. We have another question that was in the chat box, is the fact, and it was highlighted by somebody, regarding, the fact that visibility of boys victims of violence, and mainly sexual violence, is really less apparent than girls, sexual abuse of girls. So do you have some response regarding that? Who wants, because I don't see you, I don't know who is going to take the floor.
I can.
Please go.
¿Puedo intervenir?
Go ahead, please.
I think that's an important question. I think this is also very important to understand that children, both boys and girls, have very specific needs and also very different understandings in terms of what a safe environment means to them. And incredibly important to shape prevention measures. And again, that whole aspect of listening to both boys and girls in terms of what their ideas are around the safe environment, what challenges they face in interaction in their society and communities, and to shape those prevention measures and response mechanisms with them. And it is sometimes when one actually addresses a topic like, for example, sexual abuse in a community or particular context, that people immediately associate it with the girl child. But our own experiences that we've had within our organization, as well as experiences that were in other organizations or the church, show that boys are just as vulnerable as girls. So it brings up the other important issue of awareness raising, creating that awareness that the issues around safeguarding are cross-gender.
Thank you. I think Olga also raised her hand. Olga?
Hola.
Hello?
¿Puedo intervenir?
May I intervene?
Thank you. Gracias.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Lo que sucede con todo esto, yo creo que voy a tocar ambas preguntas. El hecho de que haya más denuncias no necesariamente quiere decir que ha aumentado. Quizás se están generando más mecanismos de confianza y más recursos para poder denunciar. El hecho de que no se denuncie no quiere decir que las situaciones no se estén dando en perjuicio de niños, niñas y adolescentes. Yo creo que cada día tienen que fortalecerse pues todos los recursos para poder interponer.
But that they may have assume that they have the resources to make this attempt of denouncing these situations. But I think that now boys are kind of realizing this situation of abuse and also are discovering the processes of denouncing this kind of vulnerability. So I feel that in each policy are creating very clear paths where ethics are very important, and we are also very proud of our specific policy of denouncing these situations, so we can start a process of protecting them and keep following this type of abusing and not letting them behind.
You highlight the challenges to be listened, to be informed, to be seen as actors of positive change. So if you have one priority, because you have around the table adults and also at the decision-making levels, what could be this priority? Nathan, Winnie, very shortly and straight to the point. Many thanks. You have the floor. Winnie, Nathan.
Hi. I think that the priority should be making sure that when you listen to your young people, making sure that you actually show them that you're going to use their feedback rather than just listening to them and then going away and never touching that information again, actually taking that with you and trying to implement it. And of course, there's going to be some pieces of opinions or views that maybe aren't so relevant, but the ones that are relevant, definitely take those into consideration and show that you're putting them into consideration so that we can see that you actually care rather than leaving it.
Thank you, Winnie. Nathan? Nathan, are you here?
Yeah, she has put it.
Please, go ahead.
Us. Yeah, she has put it. Involving us makes us.
It was short and straight to the point, allowing me to go to the closing remarks. And I just want to tell to all of you, thank you for your active participation in today's rich and stimulating discussion. It has been a valuable opportunity to learn and to share experience in building a stronger culture of child safeguarding. Children, as you highlighted, have the right to be free from harm wherever they are. This is a promise of the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. But we know of the unacceptable failures to keep children safe across organizations in different sectors and settings. Violence, abuse, and exploitation have devastated the lives of children in places where they should have been able to grow, to thrive, and to develop to their fullest potential. These crimes have often been ignored or minimized. Accountability has been absent. Regardless of the setting, we know that imbalances of power allow impunity and abuse to flourish. And there is no group that experiences this imbalance as keenly as children. All too often, children's voices are not heard. Their stories are not believed. They are shamed into silence. They have no reliable channels to report violence that they suffer. They are denied the support and justice they deserve. The key function of raising safeguarding standards is to address this imbalance of power. It is about creating the condition to empower children to prevent abuse from happening in the first place and to ensure there is an effective response in cases of abuse or exploitation.
إجابة فعالة
Safeguarding requires child-friendly ways for children to receive information on how to keep themselves safe and where to turn if they need help. Good child safeguarding must also support children in their peer-to-peer protection initiative. Good child safeguarding requires children to be meaningfully involved in the design, delivery, and evaluation of all safeguarding action. Through enabling legal and policy frameworks, states have a key role in creating the condition conducive to strong safeguarding practices in organization. But the law cannot solve the problem by itself. Changing organizational culture requires leadership, commitment, and time. This investment is essential. We know that everyone has a role to play in keeping children safe. Whatever their specific function or responsibilities, those working with children must be fully supported to do the right thing. I am committed to continue working with all key stakeholders, member states, and all other partners, and including children, to achieve the inclusive, rights-based, and cross-sectoral approach that is needed. To that end, my mandate has commissioned a review of child safeguarding law and practice across diverse sectors and in different parts of the world to identify the main elements of this approach. The initial findings of this work point to the growing use and consolidation of child safeguarding practice in different settings, but they also point to ongoing challenges. Progress within and across different sectors remain very uneven. The implementation of child safeguarding policies often remains entirely voluntary rather than being mandatory. Meaningful child participation is often absent, and evidence regarding the impact of implementing child safeguarding policies remains limited. But there is a growing momentum to tackle this problem. It is important to acknowledge the commitment and leadership of those who are truly pushing for positive change within and beyond their own organization and sector. We have heard many strong and commendable examples of this during this discussion. Today is not a one-shot event. It is part of a process. I look forward to continuing my strong collaboration with key stakeholders, including children, to share and promote promising practices such as those we heard about today, and to raise the bar when it comes to child safeguarding. Thank you to all of you. Over to you, Miguel, for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Madame Al-Hamid, and thank you to Winnie, to Nathan, to the young people, to the distinguished delegates, panelists, and colleagues who participated, in particular, the ones who have contributed with their thoughts, comments in the chat box. with valuable questions and thoughts for this very active and important discussion. Many experiences, as was mentioned a second ago, were shared to illustrate the messages that we conveyed today. I'll take this opportunity to share a brief one as well. Many years ago, I was reading a book, and the author in the preface shared why he decided to write this book. When he visited the prison, he saw in one of the prison cells a message that said, "I was here and nobody told my story." That prompted him to write that book. How many children who are victims of abuse and violence do not have the opportunity, the means to report and to share their stories as well every day? We have heard examples of how to enable children to report and to share their stories, examples of leadership from children and adults, and their commitment and solutions to help ensure that child safeguarding is everyone's business, and that this building back better from COVID is indeed an opportunity to build a more resilient, inclusive, and equitable society. We truly hope that today's discussion has provided inspiration and also some practical examples and ideas about how to strengthen child safeguarding mechanisms in your own context. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a lovely day.